Today we have Zach Leatherman joining to talk all things Eleventy, and I'm personally a massive Eleventy fan. It's my favorite static site generator, and I'm really excited to talk to Zach today. Welcome, Zach.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thanks for having me.
I want to kick off. There's many things I like about Eleventy, but one of my favorite things is the name. Do you want to give us a bit of a backstory on the name and how it came to be?
Yeah, the origin of the name sort of came from my grandma, and it was a story of how I used to count when I was a kid. I used to say 9, 10, 11D, 12D, 13D, 13. It's like the suffixes of teens. I felt like should have been applied to the earlier tens as well. Yeah, and that's kind of where it came from. I mean, there's a lot of different sort of references, I think, to in popular culture. There's some Lord of the Rings stuff. There's some what is that movie where they take it up to 11?
Spinal
Can't
Tap.
think of the name right now. Yeah, Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
Yep, that's another one that people commonly associate with it, but no, it just came from my grandma.
Yeah. I love the backstory and I love the name. It just makes me feel good saying it. So one thing I love doing with open source projects is going back to some sort of announcement post, and reading that and really trying to understand why the project was created and where it was heading at that time, and then kind of looking back and reflecting. So I want to read a little bit from your Eleventy announcement post.
The original one.
Yeah. Another static
Nice.
site generator. Yes, but why? Fair question. Eleventy was created for three reasons: flexibility, betting on JavaScript, and not a JavaScript framework. So fast forwarding, well, let's actually stay back then. What was going on at the time? This is in late 2017, that you felt the need that this project was needed.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of the heyday or the start of single page application frameworks. I think Gatsby was sort of on their meteoric rise to popularity. I think they had maybe raised their first 15 million or 16 million in investor funding. Or yeah, maybe a year or two after that. And yeah, it was kind of, you could kind of see the trend of single page applications sort of permeating everything in the web development space. Um, and yeah, I wasn't necessarily on board with that as a default for creating websites. Um, and that was not the most popular stance to be had at that time. It's maybe more accepted now. But yeah, everyone was sort of on board with isomorphic JavaScript, single page applications, and that was where all the attention and money was being put into. Um, but yeah, I wanted something simpler, something that was yeah, just had fewer dependencies and was an homage to how I thought a better default for the web could be.
Mm. And the Jekyll has existed at the time, and it feels like Eleventy's heavily takes a lot of things from Jekyll. Is that true? Were you inspired by Jekyll, and what were you seeing in the limitation of the existing tools that said, okay, I need to create my own one?
Yeah, absolutely. Jekyll was a huge inspiration. I feel like Jekyll was just an incredible boon for static sites just as a whole. I
Mm.
think it was a huge thing. I used Jekyll for many years on my personal site. After a WordPress iteration, I migrated to Jekyll, and I loved the tool for many, many years. I never really got on board with the Ruby part of Jekyll. And I think maybe that's something that a lot of folks in at least the front end web space identify with.
Mm.
They want to write in languages that they know and are comfortable with. And yeah, I mean, I think Eleventy's roots really came as a sort of JavaScript for, or a JavaScript based version of Jekyll. So a Jekyll port, at least in ideas, to the JavaScript space. And yeah, that's sort of how my own personal website went as well. Yeah, I migrated it to Eleventy after I developed Eleventy, and yeah, it came from Jekyll. So I think a lot of the early folks that were using Eleventy too were sort of Jekyll converts as well.
Yeah, I found that transition very easy, and a lot of the kind of quirks of and I guess baggage of Jekyll, because it had gone through so many iterations and had to have a lot of legacy stuff. Whereas Eleventy was a fresh start and could kind of, you didn't have these special folders that you had to put markdown, and you could have complete control over everything, and so I really found that a breath of fresh air. I get all the stuff I love about Jekyll, but don't have a lot of that legacy stuff that's just kind of stuck with Jekyll.
Yeah, and I cannot get over how awesome the idea of just putting a bunch of source files in a directory and running a script on it just feels super powerful in a way that you don't need to manage anything later. Like once the site is built, that's your thing that you can drag and drop into whatever. And this was, sort of even pre CI/CD, when like continuous delivery services became popular for websites. And yeah, I mean, I think in the beginning, I was still using sort of SFTP to update my site, or SCP to at least deploy it to production, which in hindsight was not optimal. But yeah, I think we have better options now.
That's it. And I think that's what's behind this whole movement is, yes, a lot of that foundations are similar to websites from the 90s, but the ecosystem around it is completely different, and has plugged a lot of the gaps and a lot of reasons for using complete like dynamic rendering.
Yeah, and I think the thinner layer that we can put, as thin of a layer as we can put on top of web standards, the more long-term benefit you have out of your code, and your projects will live much longer, have a much longer shelf life to them as well.
So let's dig into that one. So one of the core philosophies of Eleventy from the beginning was it's a JavaScript framework, but it doesn't have any opinions on the JavaScript on your actual website. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I have been in this web development game for a while now, and I've seen a couple of different iterations of trends come and go, and I know that the further you go out on the front end, the faster the churn is. So things tend to come and go very fast, and I think JavaScript frameworks are no different. It seemed like for a while there was a new one cropping up every week or so, and yeah, I think that that's not a bad thing by any means. It's just more churn to your project. So the more and more you buy into the front of the front end and layering complexity on top of your front end, the more churn you have in the application development space as well. You sort of inherit the churn from the dependencies that you choose to use on your project, which I think is not always advertised up front when folks are creating marketing sites for their frameworks. But yeah, I think it's important to sort of know how, even within a specific framework, how many major releases come out and how often those major releases come out and how often breaking changes are shipped. And I was, bit in a little way when I sort of bought into, and even in Eleventy, we had a Vue plugin a couple years back. And I mean, it still exists now, but we released it sort of right as, or like a couple months before Vue 3 came out. And so there was a ton of churn that went into the Vue 2 to Vue 3 migration. And they ended up, the Vue folks ended up like deprecating all of the tools that we're using for our Eleventy Vue plugin. So I don't know. I feel like that was a hard lesson to learn. But I mean, it is what it is. The more you buy into the frameworks, the more churn you're gonna experience.
Yeah, and it feels like Eleventy is really embracing web components. What does that look like, and what's the thinking behind that, and what does that look like in Eleventy?
Yeah, so we have a template language called WebC. And really what it is just using web component conventions in your projects to have a server rendered component mechanism. So you can have single file components that have your HTML, your JavaScript, your CSS in them, very similar to like a Vue single file component or a Svelte single file component. But they're closer to web component standards. And they're sort of using those standards to render those components in a server first way. So you can have WebC components that don't have any client-side JavaScript at all, which I think is an important thing. The client-side additions to web components are an extra layer on top, and it's not something that you need to buy in first. And I think that's something that has been missing quite a bit in the web component space because so much of the attention has been focused on sort of client-rendered web components, and we need a server-rendered story as well.
Yeah, I've just been dabbling with it recently, and it's pretty freeing being able to have the standardized language that isn't liquid or mustache or whatever the flavor is. It just seems like a more sustainable future to your point, where that standard will be supported no matter what tool and what framework comes in the future.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even necessarily recommend using WebC for all web components. I feel like if you're doing client rendered things and you don't need a server rendered part of that, just have a zero dependency, standalone, framework free web component. You don't need to buy into the server rendered piece if it doesn't fit your requirements. But I think for a full component story, you need to have a server rendered piece.
Yeah. One of the first things that kind of blew my mind with Eleventy was how collections are handled. And we were talking before about Jekyll. In Jekyll, there's two ways. You kind of have this magic _posts folder, and anything you put there is going to get turned into a blog. And then you can define your own collections. And you write a lot of configuration to do that. With Eleventy, you create a folder and you can create a configuration file that will initialize front matter for everything in that collection, which that was the bit that I was like, this is amazing, because before that I have these huge configuration files, and if you're trying to tweak it, yeah, it can just get very cumbersome and confusing. But there's one tiny file in a folder that just handles the initialization of front matter for that collection.
And that's sort of...
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I see that elegance across Eleventy, and that kind of thinking and really care. And that's one thing I really admire about the project.
Yeah, I mean, that feature came organically from our issue tracker. That wasn't something that we had originally. We call that the data cascade. And that idea sort of came, you can go back and look at the issue tracker to find the origin of the data cascade. I think it came from someone named Philip. And yeah, I mean, I immediately saw the benefit of the idea, and I was like, we need to add this because it's amazing. We can have a folder that will sort of cascade its data properties to the entire structure of your site, and you can manage that all in one place. So yeah, I mean, it came early, but it wasn't my idea.
Yeah.
I just saw the value of it.
I think that's one thing that in open source is just amazing, like having this collection of people who just want to contribute and make something better for the purpose of this thing existing and being as good as it can be. And Eleventy in particular, from what I can see, is a very strong, passionate community of users and contributors. How is that? yeah, from 2017 to when you announced the project, what's that? Yeah, how has that grown and turned into what it is today?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a good question. It's hard to even fathom where we were at the beginning and see where it's at now, where we have almost over 7.1 million downloads on NPM, and we have over 60, I think about 65,000 open source repos are using Eleventy on GitHub right now. And yeah, it's just sort of incredible. We have a very busy Discord with thousands of people in it. And yeah, I don't know how to explain it really, other than people. We've just gathered together folks that love building websites, and Eleventy sort of helps them do that.
So, is there any other issues or I guess very unique edge case bugs that have come from the community that have really stood out to you and have inspired parts of Eleventy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the data cascade is a big one. Yeah, it's kind of hard to think back. I feel like the biggest one that people have been waiting for a long time is our sort of ECMAScript module support, and that's coming with 3.0. We sort of got the code going for that, and all of our test cases are passing, and yeah, it's looking good for our first 3.0 canary.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what's going to change when that's released?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm trying to make as little change as possible, but we do sort of have this larger project sponsorship change that's happening, and we are going to deprecate a few things in 3.0 that were maybe less popular. We did do a community survey in Eleventy a couple months back and sort of gauged what the most popular plugins were in the community, and sort of at the bottom of the stack were our serverless and edge plugins, which were surprising to me in a way, and maybe not in another way. And that I think obviously this static build is the reason that Eleventy is so popular. But we had sort of put a lot of work into, a disproportionate amount of work into the serverless and edge plugins to sort of make Eleventy run in edge runtimes and serverless runtimes. And it just really wasn't used very much. And the survey reflected that. So I think what we're going to do moving forward is sort of deprecate those plugins in 3.0 and sort of provide more instructions on how folks can run Eleventy in serverless and edge environments themselves without having dedicated plugins that I have to manage to do that. And yeah, that's just going to be part of the project management going forward. I think it's important to sort of get back to our roots and the main use case of what people like and use Eleventy for, and sort of refocus our efforts to satisfy that. I think we cast too wide of a net, and it started to drag the project down a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's how old is Eleventy now? 6 years.
Yeah, it's weird to think about, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's natural over a 6 year period of like trying to find where that edge is, and with technology, everyone's always looking like an iPhone. Okay, what's the next version? What am I going to get in this version? But on the other hand, I mean, iPhone's finding this now, right? Like, what else do people want? or like, and it can be tempting to move away from that core mission and core value that the project offers. And I think it's really cool that the community is driving the project and really having a say in the direction.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there would be any other way to do it, which maybe is, I don't know, not as common as I think maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah. I interrupted you before. What were the other things that came from the community that have really had a big impact on Eleventy.
I mean, we sort of talked about ECMAScript modules, but that seems like almost inevitability, just in terms of standards-based things. I think that for a while we took quite a few inspirations from the Astro project. They sort of really popularized the island-based architecture that I think came from Etsy and some of the folks that worked on Preact. And yeah, we have our own sort of island web component that offers some very similar things and shows you how to build some of those client-side interactive components in different JavaScript frameworks as well. Importantly, code that we don't manage, but Island can work with a bunch of different JavaScript frameworks on the client. So that's one of them. I think another big one that is maybe a few years old now is our image optimization plugin. I think that's a big thing that people want and need in their projects, a way to sort of optimize images without sort of writing a bunch of code and heavy HTML picture syntax things manually. And nobody likes writing that code. So yeah, Eleventy will do that for you. And our image plugin is maybe surprisingly Eleventy independent. You can use it in whatever framework you want. It doesn't really have any hard Eleventy dependencies. So you could use it in your own node script. Whatever you want. So yeah, I think we have a whole bunch of different plugins on the site now. You could probably go back and look. But yeah, I think a lot of things just grow organically, and you see a need for things, and and that's sort of how the project evolves over time.
I really see that philosophy not only in the I guess the source code of the website and the features, but also in the documentation and just, I guess it's a philosophy across the project as a whole. Like, one thing I really enjoy seeing is just over time, little components in the documentation getting tweaked and adding more polish and more cool little features. It feels like this is a ground for just tinkering with things and really polishing things, and I don't really see that in a lot of projects outside of like someone doing that in documentation. What maybe if you can talk through that and some of the cool components that you've made and your kind of mindset behind them.
Yeah, I think that's probably a very big question, but I really love maintaining long-term projects. I don't like building things that get thrown away within a year. I feel like that's like the worst feeling when you build something and it either doesn't ship to production or it becomes irrelevant or what have you. So I really, really, really try to avoid that at all costs. Just because it's demoralizing for that to happen. So yeah, I mean, the Eleventy documentation has been iterated on from the beginning of the project. And you can sort of go back. We have versioned history of the documentation site that's tied to every single release that we do. So you can go back and look at old versions of the website that are specific to a version of Eleventy. And yeah, you can see how it evolves, I guess. But yeah, I think the website really hasn't gotten like a from the ground up rewrite ever in its history, and I think that's a good thing and a bad thing. I think that it's probably due for some information architecture improvements. I think that there's sort of this ebb and flow of you iterate on something long enough and you need to sort of take a step back and get some fresh eyes on it. And I think that we also sort of have this tension in the project between how much do we offer out of the box and how much do we offer as additive plugins. And that's something that we're managing through, I think, moving forward. I mean, it's sort of, I don't know. I've been very tempted to write or make a video around like how to create an Eleventy from scratch. I think that would be maybe a very compelling thing, just to sort of communicate how Eleventy works behind the scenes, because I think that there is a ton of, I don't know, fancy things happening that people don't really understand or appreciate. Because we have to know, basically, when you mentioned collections, we have to know every single dependency graph between your pieces of content so that we can render collections in the correct order. Because if your index page that lists all your blog posts tries to render before those blog posts have rendered, then it won't have the access to the content and all of that stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of sort of dependency graph stuff in Eleventy.
I imagine incremental regeneration is a part of that too. Does it complicate the dependency tree, or is it already complex and it can just kind of use the existing one?
I think that, yeah, there was quite a bit that sort of went into the performance optimization of incremental builds when we were developing that feature. But yeah, it did sort of use a lot of the similar behind the scenes constructs. My dog wants to say hi.
Let's get him on.
Oh, where is she? Right. Oh no, it's too low. She's gotta, stand back there to say hi.
What's the dog?
Don't let her climb on me. Chloe.
Chloe. Hi, yeah. Chloe. Is Chloe a good dog?
Oh, pretty good, yeah. Except when she gets hyper focused on our cats. We have 2 new foster cats in our house right now.
Yeah, chaos and
yeah.
2 cats and 1 dog.
Yeah, and two kids too.
Yeah. One thing that I think Eleventy does very well, and it has been a nice kind of transition from Jekyll, is just how easy it is to extend almost any part of Eleventy, where the foundation is really good, and it's just really freeing knowing if Eleventy can't do something, that I'm going to figure out a way to do that. Was that really an idea that was built in from the start, and what cool things have you seen, like kind of extensions of Eleventy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of the original inspiration behind that was Eleventy lived for many years as a side project, and so then it becomes a question of how much do I want to maintain versus how much do I want to allow other folks hooks to create functionality themselves, so I don't have to maintain that code. So it's almost like a survival mechanism, and that you offer power to people through API extensions or plugins or what have you, to allow folks to create their own things on top of your project. And also, then I don't have to maintain that code, because it's really sort of, it's again a tension between how much time do I have as a single person sort of managing this open source project, and it's the popularity of the project's really sort of weighing against that. So yeah, I've rambled on long enough that I've forgotten your question, but
no, that was a good answer. Just the second part, like what cool things how have you seen the community extend Eleventy in weird and interesting ways?
Yeah, I mean, there's just been so many. It's almost like a full-time job to manage all of the like community contributions that come in. And luckily I've been getting some help from a guy named Bob Mansour. He has this site called eleventybundle.dev, and we've actually been syndicating a lot of the community. He's built like this giant database of community contributed resources, and we've been syndicating that to the eleventy.dev site. And so, yeah, that's been an awesome partnership, because it's a lot of work to sort of just even create a list of everything that people have built with it. I think maybe one of the most interesting things that that is just very memorable to me is that someone built a sheet music generating site using
Wow.
Eleventy. And yeah, I thought that was really cool. I think another one was someone used Eleventy to generate just hundreds and hundreds of Apache configuration files, which was maybe a different use case that isn't in the web development space. But Eleventy is really has its roots as you can transform anything with it. It's template languages, so there is no sort of hard restriction on, at least with a lot of the template syntaxes, there's no hard restriction on this needs to be HTML or this needs to be specific formats. Now WebC requires HTML and Markdown requires a certain thing, but yeah, a lot of template syntaxes that Eleventy supports out of the box don't have that limitation.
Yeah, I've heard of people outputting PHP, which I guess is the same realm as the Apache config. Then you drop that on a server and it runs. It's a dynamic site generated by Eleventy. Pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really cool use case.
Yeah. What like who uses Eleventy? What kind of high profile use cases have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, we have a giant logo cloud on our website, and that is driven from websites that I've seen in the wild. Yeah, I think just seeing NASA use your stuff, I think is really cool. And seeing CERN, I think there was a CERN website that was built with Eleventy a few years ago. Those are some big ones. But yeah, you can go out and see our logo cloud. We have a lot of different sort of very humbling logos on there.
Yeah,
it's on our homepage.
Do you have any sense of what they're why they're reaching for Eleventy and not any other tool? Why Eleventy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have a lot of good guesses that come from a lot of different sources, so it's maybe hard to say like one thing that people love across the board, but I think that the things that I'm most proud of for the project are its build speed and that we don't sort of take a stance on your content. What you put into it is what you get out of it. We don't modify your content to add like built with Eleventy things into it. And you have full control over the output that comes out of it. And I think that just giving people control over the full experience of how they build their site is something that people will appreciate.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely what I appreciate about it. Just does everything I want, but not more. And allows me to extend it as well. Yeah.
It's hard to maybe know when people are building things with Eleventy, which has its own drawbacks. But I mean, I'm not really in the game of vanity metrics all that much. So I'd rather people have full control over the markup than for me to know exactly how many sites have been built with Eleventy. That's not as valuable to me.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the community appreciates that, and that mindset across all the decisions that are made in Eleventy. People feel that, right?
Yeah, I hope so. Otherwise, it'd be a very bad decision.
Okay, let's talk about the future of Eleventy. We talked a little bit about 3.0. Why the major version shift? What's the timeline looking like for that? What can people be excited about in the project in the future?
Yeah, man, I think the big one is our support for ECMAScript modules. And we've been able to develop the code in such a way that you'll still be able to use your CommonJS projects in Eleventy 3.0, even though Eleventy is built with ECMAScript modules. So there'll be some small changes around if you use some plugins that were bundled with Eleventy core before. There'll be some small syntax changes that will be required there. But for the most part, your CommonJS project will work fine with Eleventy 3.0, which I think is something that I'm very proud of. I think being able to use or at least survive that CommonJS to ECMAScript modules migration in a way that doesn't sort of leave out the old projects and require old projects to upgrade to this sort of new way of writing JavaScript is, I think, something that's very valuable to people, and I hope they'll appreciate it.
Yeah, that's.
And as far as
Sorry.
oh, sorry.
You guys.
Oh, as far as timeline goes, I think I'm probably going to try and sneak in a couple more things. We have the full test suite running successfully with this new ESM branch, and that's all been merged into our main branch right now. And yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, that feature is looking pretty good and ready to go. But I'll probably try and sneak in a few more things to the alpha release or the canary release before it goes out, just because it's the best time to do it. And we'll do more and more alpha releases, but I don't really like putting breaking changes into alpha releases if I can avoid it at all.
Oh yeah, that's exciting. Looking forward to that. If folks are interested in learning more about Eleventy or contributing, where can they find out more?
Yeah, we have just go to eleventy.dev. That site has all the information. We have a community section that has a bunch of copy on how to contribute to the project. And really, it's just building something with Eleventy is the best thing you can do. Give us feedback. Let us know how it went. Let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, what you think's missing. And yeah, you can contribute to the evolution of the project moving forward.
Zach, thank you so much for joining today. Eleventy it has a place in my heart and is really done a lot for me as a web developer. It's a software project I really enjoy using, and I'm really excited about the future of Eleventy. So thanks for joining today.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you.